there isn't good food available to everybody. It is malnutrition that we're dealing with. Maybe it's our relationship with food that needs to change. My name's Neil Burchill. I'm a nutritionist. I've been a nutritionist now for going on 22 years. I've owned several businesses and worked with over 10,000 individuals within the province and Canada-wide, and now internationally.
When you hear the words real food, what does it make you think of?
It makes me think of a farm. It makes me think of fields and farms and the connection to food, like actually procuring it yourself, growing it, hunting it. Like, there's a primal aspect to it that, even talking about it gives me goosebumps. There's a visceral feeling that you get when you're around real food. It's almost like this connection that you have with it. Yeah, to me, that's real food. We do not use food at all anymore. Food, we're consumers, we're not purchasers, we don't grow, there's zero connection to our food. And when you think about it in the grand scheme of things in terms of evolution, that's catastrophic. There's always been this symbiotic evolutionary process where we connect with our foods, the body in chasing and gathering and growing and eating and consuming. The body absorbs the nutrients from that food and has a recognition with that food, and that food supports our growth and development and how we handle stress and the changing ecology and environment. And so that disconnect is one of our biggest issues, I find, because when you travel to other places, you see the connection to food and you see the correlation to the decline in chronic illness and disease. And that's what I work in. People, thousands upon thousands of people coming to see me because they don't want to get sick or they want a better quality of life. The landscape has changed. And now, we are still, as far as I can see, we're still hunters and gatherers, but the landscape has changed so quickly that we're really struggling to keep up with that. We're really struggling to be able to, go into the new landscape, which is grocery stores and gas stations and all this other stuff to find food to ultimately keep us alive and make us stronger than the environment so that we're able to deal with what Mother Nature decides to challenge us with.
So in short, do people have a good relationship with food?
Absolutely not. It's broken. It is broken.
Do you think that Canadians specifically, or Western culture, have a healthy diet overall?
No.
Why and why not?
They just don't have access to the food. They make everything so impossible for people to be able to make that connection. There's this process where the body absorbs food, a lot like, and this is what I say to my clients, it's like a conversation. Information without comprehension is useless. And in fact, it can actually be inflammatory. If you're trying to tell me something of vital importance, but I don't understand it, I'm going to get upset. I'm going to be visibly inflamed about that. So this is kind of what's going on with our food, is the body's lack of recognition with the food, the lack of absorption. So everybody's eating, but no one's absorbing the food because of the body's lack of recognition of the food. And in Canada, that's a big issue because of the fact that we just don't have access to these farm-to-table atmospheres that we used to. Even myself as a kid, the market, St. John's City Market, was full of all kinds of fresh produce, and now it's getting into the trinkets, and it's just, they're making it financially impossible for people who have a passion for real food to be able to bring that to the people who are looking for answers and want foods to become healthier, take the strain off the the medical system, because again, they're giving their body, we're not living in the midst of a gunfight with a knife. We're giving our bodies what it needs to do what we're asking our bodies to do, which is ward off infection and virus and, deal with the innocuous stress of, social media and careers and families. Anyway, it's a shitstorm out there, and we're really just outgunned and undermanned. I spent almost 10 years in the Navy, and we used to do boarding parties and things like that. We check, and anyway, I would see these container boats, and I would see the produce and things like that they would have on them. They're shipped halfway across the globe. Now, the big thing I want to hit on, and you've kind of given me carte blanche here to say whatever the hell I want to say, is we're not designed to eat food that isn't really from the areas in which we live. I mean, the whole symbiotic evolution was we arrived on a continent and a bunch of us died until we learned how to absorb the nutrition from the food that was available. Our microbiomes, our body's digestive systems, our bodies would acclimate to that food and learn how to extract the nutrients from it. That's why, like, the symbiotic evolution of a deer and an apple tree. The deer eats the apple, the seeds are poisonous to the deer shits out the seeds, and eventually a tree grows far away from the tree that the fruit, or the fruit originally came from. So then you get all of this, this propagation of plant and animal and growth and development and the symbiosis that happens. And when you're dealing with produce, when you're dealing with food in the grocery store, it's just not the same mechanism. When you look at these farms, when you look at how fast the stuff is grown, when you look at the cost-saving methods that they have in order to procure the food and develop the food, and it's not ripe, and then they use these gases and chemicals and stuff to make them look ripe. And I'm not a conspiracy guy. Like, I don't know the science, whether or not this stuff is hurting us. But it's not about the stuff that they put on it. It's really boils down to the fact of the stuff we're not getting. And the World Health Organization has classified obesity as malnutrition. So really, I think we should be focusing more on what we are not getting as opposed to what we're getting. And when you have food growing in the soil in in an ecosystem that you live in and have grown up in for some of us multiple generations, you're more likely to have that biological attachment to your food. Okay, so that's where I'm seeing the Canadian population right now is the food's too industrialized. A lot of the foods that we get, it's not from Canada. It's from other countries being shipped in when we have all this availability to food here. But like the lumber industry and everything else, everything gets exported. Food, the health and nutrition of an individual, it should not be an economy. Again, when you travel to places and the food is not economized, it's not part of their income, you'll find a much healthier population because they use food for what it was designed to do, and that's to make the workers healthy. And then the workers create things in order to sustain the population and maybe even sell. It's pathways. I mean, we've established such great connections and efficiency in regards to shipping, and so they're just kind of throwing everything in, like, let's fill a boat. Well, there's only so much citrus we can put on here. Then okay, let's put these add-ons, these sundries to go with it. And it hurts us as individuals because when you look at, like, someone's farm could be garlic. You know what I mean? Someone could make a living off of growing garlic for the population within the community or what have you. But I mean, I'm a living example of the demographic that you're talking about. You are taking the initiative and you're getting into, hobby farming and homesteading. And I love what you're doing in regards to showing people how easy, how fun and rewarding it can be. I'm on the other side of that table. I'm your typical Canadian. I go to the gym. I try and take care of myself. I've got kids. I'm trying to teach my kids how to eat properly. And I'm really, really working hard. It's actually probably harder for me to manage the nutritional landscape that they provided for us and the costs associated to that shit. I think I have a harder time with that than if I had and took the initiative, which is exciting to see you do it, to actually start, having chickens and doing things like that. It's incredible. But also what it does too is it prevents you from overspending. See, this is the biggest thing. I find people buy, our kitchens have gotten massive. And I've done this where I've gone into homes and kind of revamped their cupboards and stuff like that. And the shit that they keep in there because they feel like they need it. And the stuff, the stuff that keeps forever and just accumulates. And then when I incorporate some healthy nutrition, then they feel the need, well, Neil, I have to eat up all this. I've got to get rid of it. So there's that lack of relationship. But for me, as being a Canadian, I'm forced to pick and choose and to go in and purchase what I can afford. I'm forced to purchase things that are not necessarily the highest of quality, because our market here in Fredericton's only open once a week. a Saturday market, for crying out loud. And we're supposed to go and muddle through all of these people in order to get the local produce, to get the farm to table meats and cheeses and things like that are absolutely brilliant. It makes it very difficult for a family and the price associated to that, because of the costs that you guys have to incur just to make that happen. Honestly, the majority of my clients they're navigating the perimeters of the grocery stores trying to find healthy options. It's getting a lot more expensive to do that, and the sustainability of that is, as we've seen through COVID and things being shortage, or things going into shortage. You go into the grocery store and one of the staple foods that you rely on is unavailable because of the fact that they couldn't we're seeing more of that now, and it's throwing a lot of people in a tailspin. Yeah.
You spent much time in Europe at all?
No, just passing through in the Navy and things like that. But I've had the opportunity to sit at tables and see how they eat, and it's absolutely just, we could take a lot of notes. And the tables, like, to get a table less than 12 is a rarity. I hear we're afraid to eat after supper because it's going to be stored as fat, and a lot of the restaurants don't open until 8, 9 o'clock. The food is unbelievable, and they eat as a family, but their plates are individual. And this is something I describe to people is, here in our culture, it's, I was raised that way. You'll eat what's on your plate and eat it all. And then so myself and my wife and kids, you see a family sitting around a table eating the same thing, and they're all different people. They all have different needs, where when you travel and you see people in Europe and Asia, they sit at a table, they eat as a family, but you look on their plates, and their plates are very individualized because they have a selection of food. And a lot of the foods, like I said, are very local. And when you look at these blue zones that they've researched in regards to longevity, the highest number of centenarians, people living to 100, virtually unmedicated, very, very healthy, robust people, you find that, and in my industry, it's always about, blaming a particular food for the ailments. Oh, it's carbohydrates that are causing diabetes, it's fats that's causing heart disease. So you have these demographics that are these populations. And when you look at them from a large, large viewpoint, right, the grand picture, you'll see people that are eating local food, right? Whether or not you're in the Mediterranean and your fat intake is, higher, your carbohydrate intake is lower, you have a moderate to high protein intake, ton of centenarians there, people that are very, very robust, very, very healthy. And then other places, say in Asia, where fats are very low, carbohydrates are really high, they don't eat a lot of protein, but yet they're incredibly healthy. So here I think we've gotten wrapped up in the minutia of what's going on, and instead of looking at kind of, maybe it's our relationship with food that needs to change. The fact that if we ate what we had in our environment, the environment would support the organisms that support it. So then you have this symbiosis going on. And I think that there's a lack of that. And I think that's why we're combative with the food and the ecology, is because we're trying to live in it as opposed to with it. And we become afraid of our food. We think that we need to make our bodies healthy instead of just letting them be healthy and giving them what they need and nurturing that. It's a lot like raising a child. It's a lot like raising an animal. It's the same thing. And I think we've pulled ourselves too far from that. And I think that that's the big option. Like, I can't imagine being afraid of a food that was designed to help me because of some research that was, that took place in a hermetically sealed, sterile environment with test tubes. And they were able to isolate a specific nutrient of that beautiful, extravagant, complex organism itself and say that this is bad for you. And meanwhile, you look at the history, you look at, way back, and that was a part of our fundamental food. I remember, and this changed my life, I remember years ago I went we were in Florida, and we were going through a zoo. And it was one of those zoos where you hop in the car and drive around. Anyway, there was a chimpanzee display, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't want to say paddock because they weren't caged in or anything like that. And I was questioning, like, why aren't these chimpanzees caged in? They're flying all over the place. They're having a great time. And I noticed that there was a moat around the chimpanzees. So chimpanzees, primates, they're our closest living relative, right? In terms of evolution. So I said, well, why? How come there's no cages? How come there's not chimpanzees running everywhere and climbing all over the car? And the tour guide said, well, because there's a moat there. And the chimpanzees are too lean and too muscular. If they jump into the water, they're going to sink like a rock. Meanwhile, I'm watching them and they're mowing down on bananas. And, for probably a better part of a decade before that, I was telling people, well, bananas are high in sugar. You shouldn't be eating bananas. Fruit is a no-no because it's too high in sugar and it's a scourge of the earth and everybody's getting diabetes from eating fruit. All of these things. And then I'm looking at these creatures and they're anyway, so I put two and two together, started to do some research, couldn't find the dead bodies from people eating too much real natural fruit in whole food form. So it started me down this pathway of, okay, what's going on here? Why are we listening to the same advice repeatedly? The science, and I mean, evolution is a science as well, right? So we're listening to the wrong science, and I don't think that we're putting these things in keyhole perspectives. We're learning about foods, and in that, I think the information is coming out prematurely. I have a belief that the body figured it out, or else we wouldn't be here. So I think we should leave it up to the body, and I think the more whole foods and natural foods that we can eat, I think the body will be able to filter through what it needs and discard the rest, as it's shown through evolution and what's brought us here to this day. So there's a lot of people like me that are out there, Ben, that are a big problem, but there's a lot of people out there like me that have worked in the system long enough to start to see that, okay, there's a whole nother side to this. It's important to know about nutrition so that we're able to know how many bananas we need to eat in order to do this. But ultimately, we still need to go back to the fact that eating the bananas are, a banana, like eating an apple versus applesauce that you buy at the grocery store. Having an apple out in your backyard, picking it off the tree, eating it, having that connection to it, being able to go out and pick the animal. I remember the first time I picked a cow, right? I remember we were sitting there in the field and there was a cow, there was a bunch of cattle, and there was one running, not running because cows don't really run, but they were moving around and quite lively. And then there was one sitting down, like laying down. And me, being the active guy that I am, I looked at the active cow and I said, I want that one. And the farmer nudged me. He said, no, I think you want the one that's lying down. It's going to taste a lot better. So anyway, that was my first experience. And then I remember purchasing some meat for that season, and it was absolutely brilliant. It was so good to see and make that connection. And I felt different. Like I've hunted, I've shot rabbits and things like that. As I get older now as a man, there's that connection to it. Like it feels, like I said, visceral. And I felt thankful when I was eating. Like it was, the connection was there. Whereas I've eaten hamburger, I eat, beef all the time. I buy at the grocery store and there's no connection. It's faceless. And I had a different response to seeing the face on the cow. I had a different connection to it. And picking carrots out of the garden and brushing them off on your pants and eating them, they taste different, but they feel different too. If there's some connection there that's qualitative.
Now it's great to talk about eating good food and even raising your own food or going to pick out your own beef, but I think the fact that remains is how the fuck are people affording food right now?
They're not. Honestly, like we've turned into scavengers. There's people that are purchasing food now solely on price point, nothing with nutrition. And these companies are getting much more outrageous about it. Like, putting packaging that looks like a farm. People buy packaging, they don't buy the food. And it's a very dangerous place to live, because what's happening is we're putting our bodies, these structural machines, these biological machines, together with duct tape and chewing gum. And this is it. And then the environment challenges us and we're not up to the challenge. It would be like building a house not to code, right? Building a house that was designed for Southern California here in New Brunswick, and then you have minus 46 degree weather like we just had, and 60 centimeters of snow, and see what happens, right? And I think that's that's a big part of what's going on right now is just it's unaffordable, it's inconvenient for people to eat real food, and they're being forced down a path. And when it's happening to everybody, Ben, it's innocuous and you don't really see it. And then all of a sudden you're stricken with these health issues, and these things come out, 35 years down the road. And a lot like smoking, it's hard to convert, cause and correlation, right? So 25, 30 years down the road, the structure starts to collapse prematurely, the same way as a house would as if it was built with discount material and poorly constructed. And then we're scrambling to try and fix it with acute responses. But the problem is it's a chronic issue, and it's because that when the body's stressed, when the body has damage, when the body's growing, there isn't that nutritional absorption. And again, going back to what I said before, eating food is only half the conversation. Me saying what I'm saying right here, right now, this is only half. You've got to listen and understand it. And this is what's happening with the bodies right now. Is what we're facing right now is malnutrition. And let's just call it like it is. It is fucking malnutrition that we're dealing with. The reason why you're storing fat is because your body is short of food. It's short of nutrition. So it's the same way as if you were short of cash. You would find creative ways. You would put it away. You'd save it. You'd be very frugal with your spending. Whereas someone who's making a lot of cash, who's got a good, solid income, steady income, they're investing it. They're living, they're evolving. And I don't think that's one of the biggest issues today is there isn't good food available to everybody. And even in these food deserts, I think that's just, I think that's a misnomer. All right. I think we are in the food desert right now. I think it's really, really hard to procure on a regular basis the amount of food that one needs in order to deal with the environment that we're in today and the chronic stress that we deal with on an emotional level.
How would you eat, or how would you suggest even people eat and afford food currently? Say you're a single mom on a very strict income. How would you eat real food and nutritious food on a strict budget?
It's funny because I've worked with a lot of off-reserve Aboriginal populations, and they're in the same boat, and I can actually empathize. Can't relate because I'm not a single mom. Contrary popularity. So it's about keeping it simple. We don't need as much as they tell us to. Again, the variety is what's killing us, Ben, too, is we feel we need all of this variety. But back when we were healthier, physically healthier, we were stronger, more robust, we died of things that we can now cure and prevent by building good houses and having good acute medical systems set up so that if we break a bone or get an infection, we can help deal with that. But when it comes to the chronic everyday health, it's keeping it basic. Have some animals that you can, like makes like. If you want to grow and develop strong musculature and bone density and arteries and blood vessels, and it sounds morbid, but it's it's how we developed and how we came to be the way that we are today at the top of the food chain, the alpha or predator or whatever, apex predator. Like creates like. So you eat animals and you eat vegetables and you eat fruit, and that's the bulk of it. In my experience, and candid. No disrespect to farmers out there, but the grain consumption is a big issue. We eat a lot of grain. We don't need as much grain because we're not as physically active as we used to be, and we're not just expending as much fuel. Fruits, vegetables, animals, like those types of things, they will sustain and more than sustain. They will give you what you need in every aspect, every macronutrient, your proteins, fats, carbohydrates, water, and then all of your micronutrients in such rich capacity, because believe it or not, they filter through all the crap. When I eat a moose, I'm eating a 800-pound vegetarian. that filter through all the lectins and all the crap that's associated to it. That tissue is actually developed through, berries and moss and filtered micronutrients, and it's incredible what your body can extract from that. And I think, again, we overcomplicate it. We need too much variety. We need all of this stuff to happen. So if I was to land in another country as a single mom, the first thing that I would do is I would, find for myself, I'd find a market. I wouldn't have to spend a lot of money because I know that I don't need a lot of volume. When you eat quality, you don't need to eat as much. And again, it goes back to that caloric thing where the body regulates itself. It knows what it needs. It's not, your body's all about efficiency. I've seen it with exercise. There's a reason why when you exercise, you lose body fat, because body fat compromises circulation, puts weight on the joints, and the body's like, this movement sucks. So if I drop body fat and maintained or added some muscle, I'd be able to do this a lot better. So the body evolves. It just needs the material in order to build that and support that evolution. So again, you get the whole combination of, going into an environment. I'd find someone who would sell me some chickens. If I had some property, even if I had to set a tent up or a lean-to or something somewhere, and have some chickens, have something that was easy and didn't take a lot of feed, that was simple to manage. And I'd plant a couple apple trees, and some easy and some, cruciferous vegetables, something that's resilient and didn't take a whole lot of processing. And and honestly, I'm confident with this as living in Canada and just living normally. If shit went sideways, I would know what to do. And in our country right now, we're up against a wall. They're taking away our tools that we even use. I couldn't go anywhere. I mean, even carrying a rifle, like to have something to protect myself, but to feed my family. I mean, we have a luxury here. We have so much available to us in regards to, live, like being able to go out and go and hunt and, living that way, that primal life. Our hands are being tied. We're not saying anything about it because we don't really understand the severity of it, and the outcome is going to be when it happens, and it's happening so slowly. We're just going to find ourselves in that acute stage where all of a sudden we've lost the ability to support ourselves in every capacity, and we become dependent on people and things that we shouldn't ever have been dependent on.